Every living person can tell a story about something scary happening in their life where there were sure ghosts or monsters were out to get them. I encourage you to go to anyone and ask them about the scariest time in their life. I asked close friends and family about their stories, and I heard plenty from spooky ghost stories to roller coaster rides to horrible people doing unsavory things. I can't help but envy them, as most of their stories were lighthearted and were things such as animals, but not me. I've been thinking of a way to tell someone this story without coming off as insane, as even the people closest to me don't believe in it. I even convinced myself it wasn't real for some time. I went to therapy and got told I was some sort of schizophrenic and my brain was filling in blanks as some sort of trauma response. I found comfort in those moments and ideas that my brain made it all up. That was until last month when I brought my sister and dad to clean out an old storage unit I had been paying for since college. I was sick of paying for it, and it was time for it all to go. Memories shot back to me as all the things I'd been hoarding since childhood were discovered among them. But I froze when I came across a small wooden box with a lock on it. I knew immediately what was inside. I didn't bother finding the key as I smashed it to the ground, revealing the only things that could convince me that I wasn't insane. I stared at the items. I lifted the broken watch once belonging to my friend and the photo of 5 naive young adults standing out of a log cabin. I couldn't stop the tears from running down my cheeks. Now I come here to share my story. This was 8 years ago in my college years. I was going for a degree in electrical engineering, but you know how college is expensive. With the scholarships I had received, my first year was free. But not the other 3 years, so my free time was spent working, trying to save up money for the following years. No matter how much I worked, it was never going to pay it all, and I was forced to take out student loans. Summer was coming up, and I came across an article for a research study. They were offering to pay $10,000 a month for people to stay in an old lodge for some shutdown summer camp, with an additional bonus if you could make it through the summer. Normally this would set some red flags in most people. But I was desperate, and there's no way if I worked over the summer I'd ever come close to making that much. So I reached out to the group and they accepted. I was sent a list of things that I should bring. Plenty of clothes. All participants will only be able to wash clothes once every 2 weeks. Typical camping gear, lanterns, tents, sleeping bags, etc. Non-perishables. Food will be provided, but it's always nice to spice things up. Knife or axes. Games to pass the time. Recommend games for multiple people. Books. A canteen. I always enjoyed camping, so I already had all the stuff. Camping with strangers sounded fun to me. School's ended for the year and the research thing started in 9 days, so I drove up to my dad's place to spend a week beforehand. My gear was there anyway, so it made sense. Plus, going there first would cut an hour off my 10-hour drive. My dad was happy to see me, and my sister was acting bratty as always. I didn't tell either of them the full details of where I was going. I thought they might call me stupid and try to talk me out of it. At the time, I had the thought for a split second that this could be the last time I see them. The drive up there was long and boring, almost 9 hours of silence as my radio in my car didn't work. There was a town 30 minutes out from the summer camp, so I figured I could stop there for the night to eat and rest. It was a small, quaint place, but there was a dinner and a motel, so it was good for me. I stopped at the dinner and ordered a burger, and it was surprisingly good. I had all day, so I took my time and asked my waitress if she knew where the camp was. Maybe there was a shorter route to cut off some driving, and she just said it was somewhere up north. I found it funny because that's what I told my family. I spent the rest of my day in the motel and nothing exciting happened. The following morning started with the drive up to the lodge. It was around 45 minutes, and I was just relieved I wouldn't have to drive for a while. I was the last of everyone to arrive, and I assumed the people doing the research study would meet us there, but no luck. I did end up meeting the 5 lucky strangers I would get to spend the summer with. I decided to do small interviews with all of them just to see what they were like. Lauren, 21, female, with blonde hair, blue eyes, Caucasian, recently lost her job and is doing this for the money while she tries to find something else. Hunter, 25, male, brown hair, hazel eyes, Caucasian, wanted to get away from his dad's farm for a bit. Dakota, 21, male, black hair, brown eyes, Native American, figured this would be a good break and would help pay some of his debt. Camila, 22, female, brown hair, brown eyes, Latina, just wanted the money. Ava, 21, female, green hair, brown eyes, Caucasian, wanted to get away, and this seemed like a paid vacation. The whole group seemed fine, but right off the back, I could tell there was a split in the two groups. Hunter, Camellia, and I got along, while Lauren, Dakota, and Ava gravitated toward each other. We began to think for a second we were at the wrong place or something. I tried reaching out to the researchers, but there was no service. Everyone else had the same luck. Hunter just went into the cabin anyway despite our protest. But that was the right call, as we found our first care package and a note. The care package had food, water, blankets, and a rifle with 30 rounds. It had the words "for bears" carved into the stock. "Look, this is too many words. Anyone else want to read it?" Hunter asked. I took the note. It read, "Hello patrons, we at Millen Incorporated are very excited that your group agreed to be part of our research study. Now all of you must read this note, as its contaminants are of utmost importance. We are monitoring you and will not get in contact unless it is an emergency. Food and water will be provided once a week by an associate. We ask you not to interact with this person, as it may interfere with the study. All of you will be allowed to do 1 load of laundry every 2 weeks. The washer will not work any other time, so do not try. The lodge does have central air, so don't worry about the weather. All of you are allowed to leave at any time. Do keep in mind you are paid by the month and will not get paid unless a full month is finished. Now the following should be reviewed multiple times by each person, as the rules must be followed. Failure to follow the rules can end in unforeseen consequences." That brought a chill down my spine. 1. Do not leave the lodge between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. A clock is provided with the exact time. 2. If you decide to leave, you must leave between 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. 3. Do not attempt to leave summer campgrounds unless it is to exit the research study. 4. Do not eat anything besides what you brought and what we provide. 5. If you see a man outside your window between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., do not interact. "What the fuck?" I said out loud. "Keep reading," Ava said. 6. Do not attempt to kill any wildlife unless in self-defense. 7. There is a locked door in the upper part of the lodge. Do not attempt to open it. 8. If someone begins banging on the door between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m., do not let them in. 9. Lock the main cabin door each night and make sure all windows are shut. 10. If you smell something sweet like peaches while outside, immediately run and lock the cabin doors. Do not leave the cabin until the following morning. 11. They are not your friends. They don't want to help you, so do not take anything from them. Once again, review these rules among yourselves several times. "That's cryptic," Dakota said, taking the note and rereading it. "I'm sure all of it can be explained as part of their research study," Hunter replied. "The money to good. I don't care how scary shit gets, I'm staying," Camila said. We spent the day getting to know each other. Lauren wanted all of us to spend the night outside, but we reminded her of the note. She tried to fight us on it, but gave in. Hunter and I locked the door and started checking the windows. There were plenty of rooms that each of us could have our own. I went upstairs to my room when I came across a door. I tried opening it, but it was locked. "Shit, did I break that rule?" I thought to myself. I wrote on a piece of paper, "Do not attempt to open it," then taped it to the door. My room was smaller than the others, and I took my first ounce of free time to unpack my bag and take stock of what I brought. Clothes about 2.5 weeks worth, a canteen, fire starter, knife, compass, sleeping bag, blankets, various canned foods, and handgun which I borrowed from my dad. I didn't know what kind of people I'd be spending time with, and I wanted to be safe. I didn't have a bed, and none of the rooms did, so I used my sleeping bag as a makeshift mattress. As first days go, went off without a hitch. After the first week, that's when things started to get weird. It began early in the morning. Hunter, Ava, and I went outside to play cards. All of us were getting sick of that cabin. But we noticed Hunter's truck had been broken into. All of his valuables were inside and nothing looked damaged. It was chalked up to animals, but surely animals would leave a sign of some sort. A ton of rustling came from the bushes. We had the rifle, and while I was concealing, I also had my handgun just in case anything came at us. The first food drop came that day as well. Several of us had to try not to talk to the guy delivering as per instructions. He was odd though, wearing some sort of tactical gear, and he looked lifeless. He walked kinda slumped and didn't even seem to realize we were around. That night was the first time we came in contact with one of them. Night fell and we went about the night as checking the doors and windows. I was struggling to sleep that night, so I was up playing solitaire to pass the time. I didn't even know how to play when I came here, but now it was my main pastime. Around 2 a.m. hit and bang 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 bang. I walked out of my room to check on it and everyone was out of their room already. Hunter was already holding the rifle downstairs. The banging continued whenever it was hit the door hard enough to see it from upstairs. Then it started talking. The voice sounded like a man but was super raspy, like he had something in his throat. Hello, hello, hello. I know someone in there. I see the lights. I motioned to everyone to cut their lights. I need your help. I'm hurt. Yeah, I'm hurt. You have to help. Why are you ignoring me? I know you're there. Listen, you fucks, open the door now. If you don't open, really things are gonna happen. Hunter made his way for the door. I made a noise and he turned around. I mouthed the rules and he started to back away. The banging continued for a couple more minutes. When we were all sure it stopped, we made our way back to the rooms. When the following morning came around, you tell by their eyes no one got much sleep that night. When any of us tried to mention it, no answers ever came. It was like everyone was trying to pretend it didn't happen. 4 more days passed without any incident and we were finally able to wash our clothes. The washer was outside in a smaller shed by the lodge and we chose to draw straws to see who went first. Well, I was last in line. When it finally came to my turn, I made my way for the lodge. It was already 4 p.m. I loaded the washer and turned around. But it wasn't what it should have been. It was pitch black outside and somehow my clothes were finished. I was brought inside and I was met with Dakota asking if I needed some alone time. That added to my already confused head, and when I looked at the time it was 9:45 p.m. I sat there that night wondering if I had somehow zoned out for hours. I was snapped out of it by the same banging from nights past. I looked out into the main room to see if anyone was out there. It seemed they ignored it. So I followed suit and back to my room. 2 more weeks passed and we heard the banging a few more times, almost starting to get used to it. We followed all the rules. We were all particular about it until, well, Ava began butting heads with the whole group over petty things. One day she decided she had enough and was going to leave. We reminded her that she wasn't supposed to leave today as the designated time had passed. But she didn't care and drove off. Well, no one thought much of it until about 10 minutes later when she came driving back in. I welcomed her back and she muttered about getting turned around before driving off again. Well, again 10 minutes later she was back. She repeated this 4 more times. She began screaming there was no exit and she just kept coming back here. Dakota got in his car to lead her out, but 10 minutes later they both returned. They were both sure of themselves that there was no exit in Hunter, and I got in his truck to go check it out, but we shortly found ourselves right back. Everyone else chimed in and everyone else always ended up back there. We spent the rest of the day trying to leave only to return. Everyone seemed to be going insane as we returned to the cabin that night. When we got there we found another note in the same place our first one was. I picked it up. We warned you to follow the rules. We urged you. We explained there would be consequences if you didn't. Now you see those consequences. No one will be allowed to leave until the end of the summer. That is your fault, as you should have listened, and now you are stuck. Now reread the rule as you don't want any further consequences. Tonight they will visit. Lock yourselves in your room and do not come out for any reason. They want to keep you here and they will do anything to do so. The rules are for your safety. We hope in the future you will listen. Everyone made their way to their rooms, as what else were we to do? I heard the front door open. Every room was locked, but I still put stuff in front of the door in case. I placed my ear to the wall trying to hear the other side. I heard multiple sets of footsteps making their way up the stairs. I clutched my gun hoping they weren't making their way to my room. They didn't. They went away to find my room. I knew right where they were going. She must have locked it, but the door opened anyway. Then came Ava's scream, blood-curdling, begging for help, but none of us did. She screamed as they dragged her from her room. I looked out my window and I saw what had her. People, not normal people, wore rags of clothing and had no emotions on their faces. They dragged Ava across the ground. No matter how hard she fought, they dragged her with no effort. I locked eyes with her right before she was pulled into the woods. Seconds after she was out of sight, the screaming stopped. The following day was full of discourse. The first thing I did when I woke up was go to Ava's room. It had been torn apart and the lock to the door had been broken. Everyone was tense and Dakota and Lauren stayed distant from the rest of us. "The fuck do we do, man? I mean, they took her so easily. None of us even tried to help," Hunter said. "I don't have any answers," I replied. "Who in the hell are we working for? I mean, they have powers or something and they know what's going on with those things," Camelia added. "We have to follow the rules. That's all we can do." When night finally did come, we decided it'd be better to share rooms. So Hunter, Camelia, and I shared our room. Somehow the two of them were able to sleep. Not me. I spent the whole night staring at the man standing in the window. I didn't interact, I didn't acknowledge him, I just stared until he gave up and left. Half the summer had passed and everything became routine, the banging, the nighttime check, and the men. We saw Dakota and Lauren from time to time, but we never interacted. Dakota stood on the porch and I just walked past. The man who brought our food came to drop it off and Daleth unprovoked grabbed him. He started screaming at him, demanding they let him go, and Lauren egged him on. I knew this would cause problems, so I started running towards him. Hunter made it there before me and tackled him. "Are you trying to get us killed, you sack of shit?" The man ran to the woods. "Oh fuck you, Hunter, I'm the only one doing anything." They looked at each other while the rest of us watched. But then Camelia pointed out it wasn't day anymore. No, there was no light in the sky, and somehow no one noticed. Hunter stopped to check his watch, now cracked. "It's 10:11, everyone get to the lodge." We all rushed to the door, but it was locked. Everyone somehow, without realizing it, broke another rule, which meant they were coming. You could smell peaches in the air. They were quick, already leaving the woods, walking slowly towards us. I ran to the shed with the washing machine and they all followed. As we landed at it, Camelia was the last to come. But before she made it, they grabbed her. Hunter and I tried to fight for control over Hunter, even shot one of them, but they were too strong. We shut the door, trying to barricade it off with what little we could. We heard her scream as they dragged her away. Dakota stepped toward a window and they grabbed him. Once we tried to fight for him, but no luck as they took him as well. The rest of the night was spent hiding in the shed. But eventually, morning came and the remaining three of us left. Hunter set the rifle on the side of the lodge and sat on the steps to the porch. He placed his head in his hands and whispered to himself. I tried to comfort him, but I heard the rifle load another round. We both looked as Lauren aimed the rifle at us. "Wow, Lauren, what are you doing?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Lauren, put it down, let's talk," Hunter said. "Oh, fuck off, Hunter, I'm sick of this. I know you're involved in this, let me go," Lauren said. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Think about how he's also first when something goes wrong. He's magically okay after last night. Me, Dakota thought something was wrong, so that's why we harassed the food guy and he was first to defend him. Think he has to be involved. Why in the hell would I be involved in any of this? I mean that so." His sentence was cut off by a loud bang. Hunter gripped his chest and fell to the ground. I put my hand on the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. If only I hadn't left my gun inside, maybe I could have done more. "The ammo in his pocket, give it to me." "I did. You stay here. If you move, I'll kill you too." I stayed there, still trying to stop the bleeding. A couple minutes later, she came out of the lodge with her bag before she walked off into the woods. I didn't see her again. I buried Hunter that day, and at least it passed the time. I didn't even cry. I felt nothing while doing it. I took his watch to help with my time management. I wasn't willing to go off into the woods after her. I didn't know if they'd come back for me that night. So I waited for something, but they never came. I spent the rest of the summer alone, following the rule, dealing with the men at night. After everyone was gone, though, they came less, maybe once a week now. I didn't realize the summer was over until the day when I went outside. There was a very small care package. It had 3 things. A picture of all of us. It was the one taken on our first day. I didn't even remember who took it. I cried over it. The second thing was a small note congratulating me for finishing. The third is the check for completing it all. I dropped out of college and gave the money to my dad. I got a job at the post office and that's what I've been doing since. But the other day I quit my job. Took what money I had and bought supplies. Now I'm sitting in the same diner I had all the years ago, eating out for probably the last time. I have to go back and I don't even know why. I know I'm not crazy now, I know it all happened. But I still have to prove it to myself. I convinced a friend from college who had nothing to lose to come with me. He just wanted to know if the stories were true. We're heading out where you might ask, just somewhere up north. This is going to be a long story, so I guess I should start with some background. My name is Thomas and my girlfriend, Kelly, and I recently graduated from college. As avid hikers and nature enthusiasts, we decided to plan an outdoor activity to celebrate our graduation. We would take a trip to our favorite national park, renowned as one of the most beautiful in the country. We would enjoy hiking trails and camping out in our happy place for an entire weekend. We had been out that way plenty of times, so we're familiar with the area, but this time, there was a catch. See, there was a restricted area in this park, somewhere considered off limits, so to speak. Before, we had always obeyed the letter of the law, avoiding this large but forbidden place, content to wander in the areas open to the general public. This time, however, we would be doing something more exciting than ever before. We would be entering the unknown, the area hesitantly referred to by those in the know as the darker woods. So there we were, unloading our backpacks from the car at the park entrance. Kelly and I made our final checks and set off into the woods. We hiked several miles on our first day in the park, passing several other parties of equally prepared tourists. The weather was perfect. It had left the cold of winter behind but had not yet submitted to the blistering heat of summer. The sounds of birds and small mammals filled the air and large trees towered over us, the density of the forest slowly increasing the deeper we hiked. The trek wasn't what you consider flat, as the paths rose and fell over many small hills, but we were not in a mountainous region by any means either. As time passed, we saw less and less of other people, but sighted more of the different types of animals the park had to offer. A couple hours later, we finally reached the edge of the darker woods. A chain-link fence, about 8 feet tall, was visible from the trail. The point of no return was marked by a white wooden sign painted with the red letters "Federal Property, Keep Out." My girlfriend and I hoisted our backpacks over the fence and clambered to the other side. No alarm sounded, and no attack dogs or soldiers appeared, like one might have expected. Instead, the other side of the fence was surprisingly similar to everything else we had seen so far. No longer with a clear path to follow, we trudged into the thick of the darker woods. The first change I noticed came in the vegetation. The trees seemed to twist out of the ground, and a thin layer of dull green moss coated most of the trunks. The canopy of the forest seemingly grew thicker, but through the trees, I could tell that the weather was turning. A cover of gray clouds loomed in the sky above. I turned to my girlfriend. I didn't know that the darker woods was such a literal name. "Are you getting nervous out here, hon?" She joked. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed. I thought we might be walking into Area 51 out here. How much further do you want to go today? Let's at least keep moving until sundown. If that sounds good to you. Sure, sounds fine by Dash Dot. We halted immediately. Kelly and I had found ourselves wandering into a clearing. The area was nearly circular in shape and large, I would guess about 100 feet from one side to the other. To the left and opposite from us, a cluster of boulders jutted from the earth, forming a small stone wall. That, however, was far from the most notable feature in the area. Dominating the clearing, taking up more than 3/4 of the land, was a round, yawning pit. The ground around its rim turned to hard stone and sloped downward into the earth. The inky blackness below was seemingly bottomless. Something about the whole scene created a deep sense of unease within me. "Wow," Kelly said, "I wouldn't have expected to find a cave out here." "That must be why they don't want tourists coming out this way," I responded. "Have you noticed?" She paused. "How quiet is it out here?" Now you're the one who's nervous. No, really, when's the last time you heard a bird or anything else for that matter? It was my turn to pause. Suddenly, Kelly jumped back in surprise. She raised her hand and pointed towards the trees on the other side of the clearing. "Thomas, there's someone behind that tree. I just saw them," she hissed. I felt a slight panic well up inside me, like a deer in headlights, but I quickly composed myself, wrapping my arm around my girlfriend's shoulder. "There's no way that anyone's out here. It was probably just an animal. I'm telling you, they were just peeking out from behind that tree," she said, still staring into the woods. "Someone's watching us." That gave me chills. I looked carefully and could tell which tree she was talking about. The dark wood and warped trunk were like the others, but it stood out as noticeably wider, definitely capable of hiding somebody who didn't want to be seen. Suddenly, movement drew my eyes into the air, and I detected a disturbance among the limbs of that same tree. Within an instant, it was gone, and the branches slowly rocked back into position. I squinted, scanning the forest canopy. Again, something caught my eye, this time a few trees to the right of my first sighting. Something darted past a gap in the leaves, causing the branches to sway as if disturbed by a strong gale of wind. I took a step back. "What the?" I hesitated, unsure of exactly what I was witnessing. Then I realized something was up there, and it was making its way right towards us, moving through the trees on the right edge of the clearing. "Run!" I yelled. Kelly and I sprinted into the forest. We stumbled over sticks and fallen branches, leaves crunching under our feet. I chanced to look behind and felt my anxiety rise. Our pursuer had abandoned all pretenses of a stealthy approach. I could make out a dark shape moving through the branches, causing them to bounce violently under its weight. "We've got to go faster, or it's going to catch us," I thought. Our backpacks were dragging us down, but that thing in the trees was moving quickly and closing fast. A distinct thud shook me as something impacted in the dirt behind us. No longer willing to look back, I could now hear heavy footfalls on the earth as it bounded after us through the twisted trees. "Drop your backpack," I shouted. "What?" Kelly choked through gasps of air. Without another moment of hesitation, I threw my pack off backwards and Kelly followed my lead. Whatever was on our trail didn't seem to be interested in our belongings, as I could still hear them tearing after us with reckless abandon. Then clang! A loud metallic ring echoed through the madness. The sound of church bells was unmistakable. What kind of church would be located out here in the middle of these woods? I didn't have time to question it. The bell sounded twice more. Kelly heard it as well. "That way," she commanded, peeling off right from our current trajectory. I could see a gap in the trees ahead, and we broke through to exit into another clearing. Unbelievably, we were now running over a grassy field towards a small collection of wood and stone buildings. We didn't think twice, hurrying towards the little village. "Halt!" a gruff voice barked. I was alarmed to see a man appear from behind the nearest house, brandishing some sort of firearm. The barrel was aimed directly at Kelly and me. My arm shot out to stop my girlfriend, and we both stuck our hands up in surrender. "Wait!" I gasped, panting for air. "Something chased us here. It's right back there." I turned to point towards the woods, but by all appearances, our pursuer had vanished. I faced the villager once again. He had shoulder-length light brown hair and a mustache of the same color. His white button-down shirt was tucked neatly into tan trousers, and his outfit struck me as a little behind the times. Hard blue eyes glared at us from a weathered and stern face, which told me that this wasn't the time to question his style of dress. "We are so sorry to intrude," Kelly started. "I know we're not supposed to be back here, but we were just trying to get away from something." The man continued to look at us skeptically. Then he finally addressed us. "We don't get many visitors around these parts. Tell me where you folks are from." Kelly responded truthfully with the name of our home city. "Never heard of it," the man said. My body grew tense. After another moment of appraisal, he lowered the gun. "But I don't suppose you look like you mean any harm. Follow me. We're not going to resolve anything by standing around out here." The villager slung his rifle over his shoulder, walking back towards the houses. Kelly and I looked at each other for a short moment before jogging to catch up with the man. We passed into a village square bustling with the activity of daily life. A handful of men dressed similar to our guide gazed at us watchfully over the heads of smiling children. Women dressed in long, plain dresses scurried around performing various chores. There were no streets in sight, with the dozen or so houses connected by a network of dirt paths. Could this be an Amish community? I wondered in my head. We reached the end of the square at which sat 3 buildings, slightly grayer in size than the rest. The building on the left was square and mostly made of wood. An overhang loomed over several picnic tables, forming a small dining area. To the right was another wooden building sporting a peaked roof. A tin sign hung off a post next to the door engraved the words "The Lame Horse." Finally, and most imposing, was a building made entirely of stone, tapering to a steeple at the top. The stained glass windows depicted scenes from a Christian religion, solidifying my impression that this was the village's church. Square openings were present at the midpoint of the steeple, and I knew the bell that had drawn us here must be housed within this place of worship. The man with the rifle veered right and entered the Lame Horse, which I assumed was some sort of drinking hole. I was proven right when we stepped inside to see several round empty tables, with a long bar stationed at the far side of the room. The air was somewhat stale, and the sole source of light streamed through the windows, illuminating a haze of dust. A husky but friendly-looking man with a bearded face and thinning hair greeted us with a smile from behind the wooden counter. The 2 village men nodded to each other and our guide spoke. "Good day, George. We are lucky to have some company on this evening." The bar's proprietor faced us. "Great to meet you folks. Could I interest you in any of our fine vintages on the house?" Our guide spoke up. "I don't think this is the time for a drink." These 2 claimed that they encountered something dangerous out in our woods. We needed a quiet place to discuss, if that will be all right. "Of course," the barkeep said, looking somewhat disappointed. The 3 of us settled around a table near the center of the room. No patrons were in sight, so the silence was palpable. The villager sighed and started. "I think we better get formally acquainted. The name's Ezekiel." "Very nice to meet you, sir. My name is Thomas and this is my girlfriend, Kelly." Kelly flashed her best smile. "Again, we apologize for intruding on your town. It's a nice place you've got here." Ezekiel skinned the room like he was considering whether that fact might be true. "No need to apologize. So, you say something spooked you out in the forest?" I nodded. "More than spooked us. The thing was trying to hunt us down." "Do you know what it could have been? Some kind of big cat?" "No idea." Ezekiel's hard stare moved back and forth between Kelly and I. "Well, in any case, we lost our supplies out there." I turned to face Kelly. "At this point, I think it's best for us to just cut our losses and drive home tonight." She gave me a look of concern and started to speak, but I interjected, "And yes, the keys are still in my pocket. So if we find our backpacks on the way, great, but if we don't, it's not the end of the world." Kelly spoke up, glancing between Ezekiel and me. "I hate to hike in the dark, but I have to agree. Unfortunately, we lost our way trying to get away from that thing. Ezekiel, do you know the location of that giant hole out there? If you can get us back to that spot, I think we could find our way back on our own." I thought I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a stiffening in the barkeep's posture perhaps, but when I looked to the bar, the man had his back to us, concentrated on wiping down a glass. Ezekiel's glare intensified and Kelly was now its sole target. "Listen here, girl. You folks would be wise to avoid that place, and you can be sure as hell that no one from this town is going to follow you there." She fell silent and her eyes dropped to the table. Feeling protective, I stepped into the conversation. "You've got a history with that place? Let's just say nothing good has ever happened in that neck of the woods. Then we're finding ourselves in a bit of a tough spot." Ezekiel seemed to soften slightly. "It's getting late. We have several spare houses in the village. You can make yourself at home with us tonight." Kelly brightened beside me. "Really? That would be fantastic." Our plans were set for the night. Ezekiel introduced us to his wife, Kate, a blonde-haired woman with considerable beauty but the same worn features as her husband. The family had 2 kids, a 7-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. They were wearing the same plain style of clothing that we had seen worn by the others in the village. The couple led us to one of the small wooden houses, this one on the edge of town and only a short walk from the tree line. Ezekiel produced a brass ring of keys from his belt and fumbled with the collection until he found what he was looking for. The inside of the abode, to my pleasant surprise, was fully furnished. It was a one-room home, with a kitchen and living room coming led together and a double-sized bed under the far left window. A couch, a couple of armchairs, and a red rug all looked somewhat dilapidated but comfortable nonetheless. A brick fireplace sat vacant on the wall opposite the door, and the mantel was covered in a variety of trinkets and memorabilia. I turned to Ezekiel and asked, "This place is lovely. Do you know where I can find a bathroom?" Ezekiel replied, "We have several community outhouses. The closest one is a couple doors down." Seeing the look on my face, he smirked. "You were planning to spend this weekend in the wilderness, no?" "Who are they?" Kelly interrupted us from the fireplace. She was holding a framed photograph that she had taken from the mantel. The picture was black and white, and though extremely faded, I could make out a man and woman standing in front of the very house we were currently inside. They appeared older, maybe in their 50s, and their outfits resembled the style we had grown accustomed to here. Between the balding man's round spectacles and woman's tightly knit bun, they reminded me of that old painting, American Gothic, I think. Ezekiel cleared his throat and responded those would be the owners of this house. "Don't worry, they won't be home any time soon. They left this place quite long ago." Kate turned to gaze out the window, and I thought I perceived a look of something like unease flash across her features, if just for a moment. Kelly placed the photo back on the mantel and addressed the couple lightly. "Once again, we really appreciate your hospitality, but I'm not sure if I'm comfortable sleeping in someone else's bed." Kate smiled reassuringly. "Don't you worry. We take great pride in this village. All of the houses here are very well kept. You'll find the sheets are as clean as any you might find in a big city accommodation." Kelly seemed to relax, so I relaxed too. Ezekiel suggested that we take some time to settle in before going to sleep. As they were leaving, he turned in the doorway. "And one more thing," he said. "You lock this door tonight. And whatever happens, whatever you see or hear, make sure you keep it locked until the sun rises." With that, we were left alone in our temporary home. The dusky sky had fallen into complete darkness, but our borrowed oil lamp bathed the entire space in a comforting glow. Kelly sat on the bed and watched me pace around the small room. "I understand this isn't a great situation," I said, trying to break the oppressive silence, "but let's try to make the best of this. We can figure everything out in the morning." "I know," Kelly responded, "but I can't shake the feeling that something is deeply wrong here." "What, do you think the villagers are dangerous?" She shook her head. "No, if they wanted to hurt us, they could have done it by now. But they know things that they aren't telling us. Well, stressing about it all night probably won't help our case. Plus, I'm a little offended that you don't feel safe while I'm here to protect you." She rolled her eyes, but I could see a smile flicker across her lips. I turned out the light and we climbed into bed. Despite the unfamiliar settings, the excitement of the past day was enough to wear me down. I was out just as quick as the lamp. I awoke from a dreamless sleep with a strong urge to empty my bladder. Opening my eyes, I was disappointed not to see any sign of the morning light. I turned to Kelly, who occupied the part of the bed closest to the window. Her serene expression was illuminated by moonlight shining through the glass, leading me to conclude that the cloud cover from earlier was no longer present. I attempted to lower my eyelids and drift away, but the irritation in my body was too great to overcome. I slipped out of bed and creeped toward the front door. I had not intended to disobey Ezekiel's warning, however, making a quick trip outside seemed like the only viable option. I unlatched the lock and pushed the wooden door open. The grass was cold and moist beneath my feet. Our house faced towards the forest, which was much closer by than any of the outhouses. The yard was illuminated by silver light from the impressively resilient moon. As I gazed into the woods, a pit formed in my stomach and an inexplicable sense of dread welled up within me. I resolved to stay put and relieve myself next to the house. The silence was oppressive, and as I faced the wall, my back felt completely exposed, like a wild animal might run up behind me and tear me to shreds. My heart wanted to jump from my throat. I had barely finished my business, when suddenly, "Help me!" A strained female voice broke through the night air. The blood froze in my veins and every hair stood on end. I could sense that the call had come echoing from the trees. "Please, help!" It called again, this time louder. I turned to scan the trees, squinting to make out the various shapes. "I've fallen and I think my leg is broken. You're the first person I've seen in several hours. Please. You have to help me." I didn't respond, yet I could not move. And then I saw it. A short distance into the woods, leaning out from behind one of the trees, was the dark silhouette of a person. It was as if they believed that they were obscured within the shadows of the forest, yet in the moonlight I could clearly see the outline of what appeared to be a human, peeking at me from behind one of those warped trunks. I jolted into action, flying into the house and slamming the door behind me. The commotion was sure to wake Kelly, but my primary concern was turning the lock. Once I was sure the door wouldn't budge, I raced to the fireplace and grabbed the deadliest item I could find, an iron poker with a dull spike and hook on the end. I spun to face the door and gripped the rod tightly in both hands. Kelly bolted upright and looked to me in confusion. I held my hand out before she could make a sound. "SHH. I hissed, "Someone's outside." "Why did you go outside?" she whispered back. Before I could respond, a series of knocks impacted on the door. 3 evenly spaced thumps slowly sounded. Then someone spoke, this time a man with a raspy voice. "Hello? Hello? Is anybody home?" My grip tightened on the poker. "I was hoping we could take a trip down to the river today. The fish sure have been biting this week." The man continued. Kelly and I shared a look of confusion and terror. 3 more times a fist rapped on the door. "Hello? Hello? Is anybody home?" We maintained our positions for at least several minutes, only sparing momentary glances to scan the windows. I finally allowed my guard to drop, exhaling deeply. Kelly's eyes were still wide with fear and she appeared badly shaken. What the hell was that? Could that really have been someone from the village, this late at night? She said, her voice tremoring. I attempted a brave face. "I don't know what's going on, but I damn well am going to find out. Ezekiel's going to spill the beans whether he wants to or not. I don't really know how to start this, so I guess I'll just lay out some important info. First and foremost, I don't suffer from any mental illness or disorder as far as I know. Since I was a child I have been tested, and my family has no history of mental illness. Second, English is not my first language. I was born and lived all my life in Poland. Third, my name is Dukaslaw. This will come later. That being said, after hanging out with my friends over beer last night, I was convinced by them to share my experience somewhere safe, and I choose here to meet people who are into this kind of stuff. This memory is still fresh, and still lingers in my brain daily. I don't quite understand what happened. I am hoping that writing this out and letting others who don't ridicule me or call me insane might put me at ease, and maybe help me wrap my hand around it as I go on, and around who I was as a person just months ago. To be fair though, I do feel kind of dumb posting this on a subreddit of all places. It started around 7 months ago, when I moved into an apartment near my college that was bought by my parents. It was cheap, but cozy, and it didn't do any damage to my family's bank account. The house was a small, white, wooden hut, with a black triangle roof with a few missing tiles, for windows on each side of the house, and a small background. I was unsettled from the start though. Ever since I first saw it, I felt unsettled. The house looked pretty normal. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was just a small house. Yet I wanted to sprint away from it as quickly as my human legs could allow me to. I couldn't though. It was the only place I could go, not like I could ask my parents to rent me or buy another apartment. As well off as we aren't made of money. I may sound like I am bragging, which is fair, but I am saying this to explain why I stayed, and the sheer fear. Maybe I am just using excuses. Anyways, off the tangent. The house had a very small lawn with freshly cut, very short, beige grass. However, the second red flag, and first strange occurrence, was the wooden fence. Or half of it. Half of the fence was just gone. I considered tearing it down but didn't go through with it before moving out. I actually asked a quiet old lady who lived nearby what's up with the fence when she welcomed me. She said that a year or two ago before I moved in, it was just random. Disappeared. Or, well, half of it. She assumed it was vandals, but mentioned that others who lived closer had different ideas, which I soon learned. Another strange thing I noticed, that I was sure was a coincidence, was the two houses next to mine. They were up for sales. They were unoccupied. And they were huge. Both coincidentally sandwiched my apartment. By this time, I had known something was off, but kept it to myself, mostly focusing on befriending and hanging out with my colleagues, as well as studying. I mostly put my concerns to the back of my head. The aura, the fence, and the houses. It was sort of like how in most paranormal accounts the malicious spirit can spread its evil, warn others, and affect reality. The apartment itself was one big space with a bed, windows, a big kitchen, heaters, paintings, table, 5 chairs, pool table, desk, and chandelier, with a separate spacious bathroom. There was also a ladder that when pulled down would lead to the attic, which I usually just ignored as I don't really fuck with small dark spaces because of horror movies. It was generally just a very good apartment. Over the course of 3 days I unpacked and settled in. I invited people I met at the Collage Inn. I summed up the unnerving feeling I felt when in front of the house for the very first time as simple stress, though I did keep in mind the other strange things. And, hey, I didn't get many noise complaints from neighbors. My fourth red flag was on day 13. I woke up at night, half asleep because of a loud noise, which retroactively I remember sounding like someone playing pool. I didn't think much through it, and 8mm dietly and went back to sleep. It isn't uncommon for me to wake up and fall asleep right after. Later, I woke up to everything I put in the room being rearranged. Not like thrown around everywhere, but rearranged. The strangest part was that all the objects moved were mine, and mine alone. The furniture stayed the same. My phone was on the other side of the bed, my food was unpacked, the meat and vegetables were separated in the fridge, the backpacks were in the closet, the clothes were rearranged from how I left them and neatly laid, and the pool table had been used, which I haven't since 6 days before this incident. I quickly got up and in panic called the cops before even dressing up. For the next 3 days I stayed at the apartment of a girl I knew that I quickly began dating after this. My impulsive call to the police had its consequences, however. The police checked the house and said there were no signs of a break-in. There was no further investigation, and I felt judged. One of the cops did suggest that for peace of mind I should install Ring cameras. Many people in my college asked me what happened, and I simply answered that some asshole tried to break into my house. After 3 days, I moved back in, without my parents knowing anything had happened. I returned to my routine. After this incident, I felt too lazy to do anything to my house for safety, and assumed the douche wouldn't try it again. I also work out, so I was confident I could just dropkick the guy. Around this time I made a new discovery about my house too, the phone reception. Often, when I was in my apartment, the connection just got really choppy. I assumed it to be just a shitty connection, but then I found out the calls worked completely fine outside my property. It was just calls too, especially video calls. Everything else worked completely okay on my property. At this point, I was contemplating calling my parents for the first time in weeks to ask for a change in apartments, but I wasn't sold on it yet. That was until a day later, for days after the supposed break-in. I woke up, and it happened again. Everything was rearranged. I wasn't as shaken as last time, but I called the police again. They came, no signs of a break-in, no clues. They even checked the attic for a squatter. No signs either, they just found a bunch of empty bags, boxes, and trash you'd expect from a haunted house like a rope. They were pretty sure I was a prank caller, and told me to stop calling them or I would face criminal charges, although I'm not sure if they were bluffing or not. Though, I can tell they had their doubts, and even that, probably due to my unwavering expression of terror. At this point, I had figured out I can't get authorities involved again, at least not for a while, and that whatever was happening wasn't exactly harmful. I decided to call my parents and ask for an apartment change and explain my situation. They didn't comment much aside from just telling me they can't buy me a new apartment or rent one out. So that was no use. I decided to sleep over at my friend's house, but not before installing cameras in my apartment to watch. After I woke up, went to my lessons, and got back home, everything was rearranged again. However, it was way messier. The attic was open, one of the shelves in my closet was open, and my bed sheets were thrown off the bed. After climbing the ladder with a flashlight and pocket knife, I noticed nothing amiss up in there. After cleaning everything up and securing the attic entrance for my own sanity, I checked the camera footage. The camera footage just wasn't camera footage, it was a bunch of pixels with no pattern or reason. It was like you went into Ms. Paint and vomited out the entire color palette. Now, even though I might not seem like it, I am a spiritual, Christian person, even if I'm not the best follower. So, my conclusion is that this house was most likely haunted. It explained most of the activity. The aura, the houses, the cameras, the rearrangements, opening shelves, etc. So, I decided to call a priest to bless the house the next day. It was quite fast. I felt better after it, but I still kept myself on guard. At this point, I barely slept at night. However, after the priest left, things kept getting more confusing. The activity did not stop. Next day I woke up to the sounds of footsteps right by my bedside. They were clear and frantic. I jumped up, and the footsteps quickened. I have no idea where they went, but it was like someone had bolted as I woke up, yet there was no one. I prayed to God, it did not stop, so I resorted to every other religion there was for help. None of the gods answered. Over the course of the next few weeks, things kept getting worse, and it really affected my life. I stopped hanging out, I stopped going to classes which I already skipped, I talked to my GF only about the terrors which lead to her leaving me, I stopped showering as much, I ate lots of food, and I wasn't even worried since my parents paid for everything. Now, to just list everything that's happened in this time span in terms of weird activity. Cameras still didn't work. Things were still rearranged, but now more carelessly. I stayed up at night seeing things randomly open. At times I saw things just float. I often broke them and yelled, as if that would scare the ghost away. The attic was not open again. I bolted certain things like the fridge and hid the key, yet they still managed to be opened. At times in the mirror I just didn't see myself for a moment. It was similar to how areas take time to render inside the game, except it was the image of me in the mirror, like a vampire. And the biggest action which leads into the part where I started being extremely concerned for my well-being. One day I woke up and felt a cold breeze. At the foot of my door outside my apartment stood my neighbor, who yelled, "Hey!" I freaked out upon realizing it was my neighbor and my door was just open. It was very early too. I quickly jumped out of bed in my boxers to confront the old man. He then proceeded to explain something that put me in way more panic. When he woke up, he saw my door just wide open. This specter was now opening my door. It was putting me in actual danger. I couldn't even bolt the door, it wouldn't work, and how would I get out? The windows? It could open them too. This ghost, at least to me, didn't seem to want to actually kill me or anything. I just liked it. Messing with me. Or at least I thought. And obviously, things just got worse and worse. If this door opening kept on going as a regular occurrence every night, someone could break in, I could freeze, I could die. Those thoughts flew through my mind. I started attending classes despite sleep deprivation and sudden crippling fear because of concerns over my huge number of absences. It actually proved quite useful, as I had a distraction from my house. Still no energy to party around. I became less dynamic. Like, I was way more quiet and put together. However, the paranormal activity continued. I started hearing shouts around my house, especially at night. And objects I never owned started appearing out of nowhere. Books I never even heard of, some brand new. Sometimes I just saw things being opened up by something invisible, as if I was living with a masked roommate. I felt breath sometimes. I often felt watched when doing things. I had no more incidents with doors though, thankfully. Blinds would be down even if I put them up. I even saw them being closed in real time once. I tried recording this on my phone, but of course, as soon as weird shit began, it malfunctioned. I know, convenient. Things I remember appeared too. Or were altered. Once I remembered I saw paper I wrote randomly corrected, by myself. Even though I hadn't done it. I even briefly considered that maybe I have multiple personalities, or something. But I disregarded that idea quickly. I mostly distracted myself with Netflix, YouTube, and Instagram since I didn't talk to others that much, but even that wouldn't work, as it would quickly just switch to another show or setting. It really was like having an obnoxious roommate. Except it was a ghost. I woke up to my food being eaten. Thankfully it wasn't eaten all the way through usually. Sometimes the food just seemed off. The half-eaten food was sometimes bitten into or just randomly cut. Things got very trippy here. I can't exactly describe it, but the textures of everything started being different. I smelled different scents. I can't quite explain it. And remember that fence I mentioned? Well, I found the other half. It was stuck in my wall. Somehow. It looked like a clipping error in a video game. Half of it was just in the wall, with no depression or sign of being put there. It was as if it was always there. I tried touching it, but I clipped through it too. I couldn't grab it. I couldn't sense it. I couldn't feel its presence. It was like a texture without a model. And as soon as I turned around and looked back, it just vanished. At times when sleeping I would hear weeping next to me, to which I would scream in anger and fear until my throat turned sore, only to make the crying louder. A familiar crying. I didn't know why at first, but found out later. During this time frame, I also had a part-time job. I worked 4 hours a week. It didn't pay well, but it was something, and really put into perspective how I never really worked for anything much. I also kept begging my parents to change apartments, to which they kept saying no, but I could tell we were slowly going down under the pressure. At this point, I actually started feeling very happy. I talked to others again. All because I knew I'd leave this cursed house behind. But at the same time, I did have a realization. What if I'm followed by the ghost? I doubted it since it didn't bother me outside my property, but it was good to consider regardless. I also thought about whether I can get rid of the ghost, which led me down a rabbit hole of searching up the house's history. Not much was known or mentioned, but what I did know is that the house was constructed in 1993 and had at least 5 different occupants. One was a family, the other a college girl, another a man, another a couple, and one someone who lived there for a quick job at the city I couldn't get the gender of, with them all leaving and describing the place as haunted. Luckily, to my assurance, no one there had died, so that was a positive, but also begged the question, why was the house actually haunted? By now, it had been 5 months. My parents agreed to change apartments since I actually started working and everything went underway. My new apartment would be smaller, quite cheaper, but closer to my college. And despite that, I was glad. The last few nights in the house surprisingly aren't that chaotic, up until the final 4 cycles I spent calling this apartment home. I woke up to a noose. A noose tied from the rope that was in the attic, which was now unbolted. Throughout the day, strangely nothing happened. It was like the ghost committed suicide? I was extremely confused, but didn't feel like trying to wrap my head around it. Over the next few days, the activity returned. Things were rearranged, taken away. Everything was open, as if looked through. New things appeared, like untouchable Android phones, or drinks. At one point, I found a piece of police tape that after roughly half an hour vanished without a trace. Strange things were happening not only at night, but in the daytime as well. All my previous thoughts just kind of were thrown out of the window. I didn't get this. What did I actually experience? Should I care? Why did the activity briefly stop? What was with the rope? Was this even my concern now, as I had only a day left? I had answers to none of these. I was left speechless, with my thoughts devoid of answers. On the day I packed, I found a note. I felt like since I was leaving and the ghost died, or at least was role-playing a crime scene, I could take a picture, which I did. Clear as day. I tried taking the note, but it vanished from my pocket as soon as I left. I honestly don't know if it was left on purpose or not. I don't honestly know what to say about the note, which feels wrong because of its contents. I am just at a loss for words, so the best I can do is actually give you a transcript of it. Make of it what you will. This is an unnatural glitch in the natural order of things. It is comparable to two plates stacked on top of one another, overlapping, the liquids and crumbs falling from one to another, and once the washing machine turns on, mixing with one another. This place, by all laws of the universes, shouldn't exist. It is an error. It is a mistake of the Creator. May this place be torn down to its atoms. The ghost is me. Dukaslaw.